Frank Avila, he's a devout Christian, Catholic.
I'm probably a bad Catholic Christian,
Catholic?
but I try to, I am Catholic Christian. Yes.
So how would we, as ones who submit and surrender to one God, as Muslims, how would we go about, in a practical way, not trying to end up like we're proselytizing or being pushy? How can we talk to Frank, someone like Frank, and show them that this is indeed not the words of Muhammad, but this is revealed from the Creator of the heavens and earth, not to just the Arabs, but the whole of mankind, and prove to him, give him the evidence that this is from God?
In the end, Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah, I think that the first acknowledgement is guidance is in the hands of Allah.
Yeah.
Human beings can make their best efforts to present evidence, but in the end, Allah is the one who turns the hearts. We have examples of people like Abu Bakr, who, when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ introduced himself as a messenger, there was no time lag, there was no discussion, he immediately accepted Islam. And on the other hand, you have Musa or Moses debating with Pharaoh, and this dialogue is going back and forth over and over, and he sees miracles in front of his eyes, yet he's still not willing to believe. So the first acknowledgement, of course, is that evidence alone doesn't lead somebody to guidance. It is, in the end, their sincerity and then divine intervention. It is Allah who guides. And we ask all of us to be guided. It's not something that we own or anybody else owns. It's the ownership of God, it's the ownership of Allah, and we all beg Allah for guidance. So much so that the Muslim is required in his prayers to ask Allah for guidance. And you don't ask for something you don't already have. So if I already had guidance, I wouldn't be asking for Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim, guide us to and along the straight path. So this is something we are in need of as much as anybody else. This is the first thing. The second thing, I think the concept of miracles, as understood in Islam, as an introductory point before we even talk about the Quran, is very important. I mean, put yourself in these shoes. Maybe you live a few thousand years ago, and your neighbor, who's a nice guy, everybody knows him in the neighborhood, respected gentleman, good businessman, comes from a good family, he knocks on your door one day and he tells you that he's a messenger of God because an angel came to him the other night and revealed this message to him. And not only did he reveal his message to him, now he has to deliver it to the neighbor, to the family, to everybody in the society. And on top of this, not only do you have to believe what he's saying, you have to follow every one of his instructions, because they're actually not his instructions, they're God's instructions. And not following them will mean you will live a cursed life here and eternal doom in the hereafter. Now this is what your neighbor comes and tells you. What's your immediate response? I mean, the immediate response for any normal human being is either A, you're crazy, B, what did you have for dinner last night?
Yeah.
You know, maybe he's possessed. Nowadays we say he's psychologically disturbed. In the old days they said he's possessed.
Yeah.
Right? Or he's playing a trick. He can't be for real. So skepticism is the normal response to a tall claim like that. And this is all of the prophets. All of the prophets claim to be messengers of God, that received revelation, that speak on behalf of the Lord of the worlds. So from the very beginning, what we have to understand, nowadays it's easy to accept a religion because you have millions of followers, right, all over the world, believing the same thing. But imagine you have to be the first one. And everybody around you, your entire society says, this man is crazy, don't listen to him. Which is the same of Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, and of Moses, as it is of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So this is the first thing. Messengers put themselves in a very difficult position. Not by their own choice, because God gives them this responsibility. And we also know, it is our creed as Muslims, that messengers, prophets and messengers, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Noah, etc., etc., these are the most intelligent people that ever lived on the face of the earth. That God picked the most noble and smart people to do His task. And these people, as smart as they are, they would have pretty well known that if I make this claim to be a messenger, that the response I'm going to get is in the negative, for the most part. Yet, and it's not like they're making this casual conversation on a train ride. They're doing this with their family, with their neighbors, with their business partners, with their society, with the leaders of their communities, every single day for decades, sometimes centuries in the case of Nuh alayhi salam, right? It seems an impossible task. And in this impossible position, it is understandable that very, very few people believed. And whoever did believe was considered crazy. These are the fanatics. And at the end of the day, when it became so difficult for the messengers to deliver their message, one of the precedences, one of the great legacies of God, of Allah, is that He would support His messengers with a miracle. In some cases, the miracle would come early, in other cases it would come late. But it would come. It would come to support their message, to make them more believable. If you don't think this is from me, here's a sign. So for example, for Muslims, Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, speaks at the day of his birth. And he claims the innocence of his mother when he's a day old. This in itself is a miracle, proving the truth that he in fact is a messenger. We learn in the Quran, وَيُعَلِّمُهُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَالتَّوْرَاةَ وَالْإِنْجِيلَ, the angel tells Mary in the Quran that he is going to teach Jesus. As a child, he will have knowledge of the Torah and the Injil, the Gospel, all together. So he won't have to go study it to have the knowledge of it, he'll be given the knowledge of it to begin with. Which is why he's going to be able to correct the rabbis who may have made alterations at that time to the Bible, and he'll be coming after them, you've changed the word of God, etc. So prophets were given remarkable miracles. Now if you study the history that is common to Muslims and Christians and Jews, you find miracles like a staff turning into a snake, or a water parting in the case of Moses, or a dead person coming back to life, or the blind being able to see, or a clay bird being blown into and it turns into a real bird. These are miracles of prophets that we all believe in. The thing of it is though, Muslims believe that the overwhelming miracle of Islam, of Muhammad ﷺ, is not something visual. It's this message, it's these words. And they're not even given in the form of a book or a tablet or anything, they're spoken word. The Quran in its original form is spoken word. This is a dramatic departure from all the miracles of the past. I mean, if you talk to someone of similar faith, the Christian Jewish tradition, if you think of miracles, they're something for the eyes to see for the most part, right? A blind person being able to see again, and you know, a leper being cured, etc. But for now, this miracle is less for the eyes to see, but more for the ears to hear. So how can that be miraculous? This is the first question that comes to mind. The Muslim response to that is, number one, the reason for this miracle being an audible one is because it had to outlive the life of its messenger. We Muslims believe Muhammad is the final messenger, and this message has to be carried forward. Now for a believing follower of Jesus, when he tells his child, I saw the dead person come back to life, I saw the blind being cured with my own eyes, that's a father narrating an eyewitness account. That child would narrate it to his next generation as a family tradition. But after a few generations, it's just a story. You could believe it, or you could say, I've heard this from my parents, I don't know, I didn't see it for myself. Which is the skeptic attitude we have today. The final messenger was given a miracle that you can look into much after he's gone. Unlike the miracles of previous prophets. Just as a small example again, we believe that Noah, for example, Nuh alayhi salam, or actually let's take Salih. Salih is an Arab messenger. He was given a she-camel as a miracle that came out of a boulder. It wasn't born of another camel, it was born out of a boulder. Yeah. Now I could tell you that, but you don't have to believe me because you didn't see it happen. Right? A skeptic could say, well, that sounds nice, but it's just another fairy tale. This is mythology, Islamic mythology. So we were given something in Islamic creed, in the intellectual tradition, one consistent subject for the last 1500 years in Islamic scholarship has been the subject called I'jazul Quran. What that literally means is the overpowering, miraculous power of the Quran. That's what that subject is. So as an introduction, what I wanted to share is, we're not talking about the Quran's spiritual power, or you know, like you could say, a believer could say, well, I believe the Old Testament is a miracle in my heart. Or a Hindu could say the Vedas have spiritual miracles performed on me. Yeah. We don't mean it in that spiritual sense. We actually mean it much more in an intellectual sense, in an academic sense. So inshallah we'll talk about that a little bit.
Tell us, I want to get Frank involved here. Tell us, Frank, in this book that was compiled over 23 years, it clearly defines who God is. That He's the creator of all, the sun, the moon, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad. He's the creator of man, but He's not a man. He doesn't eat, sleep, He doesn't do any of these things that men, women do, that He's distinct from His creation. He created the creation. It clearly defines who God is and who He isn't. It talks about the purpose of the human's life, clearly defines it. It talks about the hereafter, paradise, hellfire. It has certain things that of the human development, of the embryo and the mountains and things in creation that modern scientists today have testified that there's no way that this can come from man.
Muhammad could not have known these facts about human development in the 7th century because most of them were not discovered until the 20th century.
That God transmitted through Muhammad bits of his knowledge that we have only discovered for ourselves in recent times.
1,400 years ago, when the world was immersed in darkness, the Quran was revealed, which brought light to a beleaguered world. And whereas the earlier books came with many scientific mistakes, due to the hand of man having delved into them, the Quran had none of these contradictions. The world thought there could be no reconciliation between religion and science. But the Quran mentioned many scientific facts in great detail, like how a human being developed in the mother's womb, and described other scientific facts which amaze the world's renowned scientists and scientific community.